All right, welcome. I think we're going to get started. Looks like we've got a good audience that's building here. Wanted to welcome you to this webcast that's going to really go through some of the economic benefits of VMware Cloud Foundation. And this was work that's probably maybe 6, 7 months in the making that we did with the enterprise strategy group as part of this. So this is the really the output of that. And what we're going to do through this session today is really walk you through some of the challenges that are faced by IT organizations that are looking at trying to transform their cloud strategy, and how does VCF provide really a financial benefit in terms of that. And so through this, we're going to walk through, not only the strategy and approaches, but some of the results that came out of this, and then close with a customer story as we do that. So just in terms of introductions, my name is Rick Walsworth. I'm Director of Product Marketing here within the VCF division at Broadcom, and I'm joined by an esteemed cast. I'll let Simon, Jennifer, and Keith introduce themselves.
Yeah, thanks, Rick, and it's great to be here today. My name is Simon Robinson, and I'm a principal analyst with the Enterprise Strategy Group. We're part of Omdia, and if you don't know us, we're a research and advisory firm covering the enterprise IT market, and I focus my research on the infrastructure market. And delighted to be able to share some of my perspectives today.
Excellent.
Yep. And I'm
Jen?
Jennifer Dewey. I'm
Yeah,
an economic validation analyst with Enterprise Strategy Group, now part of Omdia. And what I do is I analyze and research technology solutions and substantiate the quantifiable value of the product or service. And I was on the team that created the economic value validation paper for Broadcom.
excellent. And Keith, our esteemed customer.
Hi, I'm Keith Tudge, Data Centre Manager at Chelsea and Westminster NHS, which is a major London hospital as part of the National Health Service. We've had VCF now for 4 years, and it's been really transformed our IT. I'm happy to share my customer story.
Absolutely. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to that. So, from an agenda standpoint, as I said, Simon's going to walk us through some of the challenges based on ESG research in terms of what they're seeing as part of that. I'll then take it and essentially provide a quick overview and an update on VCF and in terms of what we're doing with the VCF platform to address some of those customer challenges. Jen will walk us actually through the economic validation, walk us through the strategy that we kind of collaborated on to be able to build this out, the approach that they took, and then actually go through some of the results. So you can see some of the results based on real customer data that's been used to be able to build this out. And then we'll close with Keith's story from NHS Trust, which is actually a really, really strong story. I appreciate that. So I am going to hand it now to Simon Robinson.
Excellent, thank you, Rick. As I say, I focus my research on the infrastructure space of the enterprise IT market, and that means we spend a ton of time interacting with IT decision makers, such as you folks on the webinar today, to understand really the requirements of the IT buyer. What initiatives are you focused on? What's happening to your budgets? What are your pain points? What is changing, right? And that's what I'd like to do today, is provide a bit of a high level perspective of some of the things that we're seeing in our research. So, oh, there we go. And actually, there are a couple of areas that we see in our research that I think are really relevant to the discussion today. So the first thing uh, that we find when we look at the average IT enterprise environment today, one of the most significant things that we see is a ton of complexity. And in fact, we do a large study looking at tech spending intentions every year, and this is a global study with senior decision makers at over 1,000 organizations. In the most recent survey, 6 in 10 respondents said that their IT environment had become more complex over the last 2 years. And additionally, 1 in 5 said that that increase in complexity had been significant over that period, right? So that's really interesting. Complexity is not new to IT environments. In fact, it's kind of something we're all pretty familiar with. But it's really interesting just to see the degree to which this is continuing, right? most environments have been complex for a number of years. And if we just think about the sheer number of things that have happened within our technology environment over the last decade or so, you factor in the growth and emergence of cloud, the edge, the rise of cloud native, the evolving security threat, new regulations, compliance mandates. You think about the pandemic impacts. Now we have the emergence of AI, right? Um, Sorry, I'm jumping around too quickly here. There we go. You got the emergence of AI. IT has always been complex. It's getting even more complex, right? And part of the issue is that there are many things happening, right? The As technology moves to be kind of a fundamental enabler of every business, right? It just makes sense that technology is everywhere, but it's now dealing with complexity. And I think we're now getting to the point where organizations are looking to address this complexity, because let's be clear, the negative impacts of this complexity are absolutely real. It drives up costs, it drags down performance, it becomes an inhibitor to innovation, right? New initiatives take longer to roll out. They're often less impactful once they are deployed. In fact, it's not on this chart here, but we did another study, and 68% of respondents said that IT infrastructure complexity specifically was slowing down IT operations and digital initiatives. So that's really my first point, is that like this complexity is kind of not going away. In fact, it's increasing. And this really brings me to the second thing I wanted to mention today. And part of what we've seen in recent years in this move to address complexity is the adoption of public cloud, right? Not entirely to address complexity, but motivated in part by a desire to reduce or eliminate that complexity. And it's certainly true that, in some respects, moving to public cloud can be one way to reduce complexity, right? If you're removing on-prem IT, then you're kind of moving that problem elsewhere. But the challenge with this is that there are relatively few organizations that are able to do this in its entirety, right? And actually, we look at this through a few different lenses. The results are quite interesting. So one of the things that we ask is this idea of cloud first for net new applications. So many organizations have had a policy of deploying net new apps to the cloud, partly to ensure that they're not making the on-prem IT environment even more complex. And we've been tracking this over time, which you see in this chart here. And what we've found over the last couple of years is that although many organizations still have a cloud-first policy, we're seeing the proportion of organizations that have this decline by about 6 percentage points between 2024 and 25. And actually, we now see a plurality of organizations, 45% in 2025, actually considering both on-prem environments and public cloud environments for net new applications. So this seems to suggest that organizations are starting to have issues with moving to, by default, public cloud first for everything new, right? So that's the first part. And then the second part is, well, that's new apps. What about existing apps? And this is kind of one of the kickers with cloud here, is that although many organizations have migrated some of their applications to public cloud, to SaaS environments, for a great many applications, this is really difficult, right? For bigger applications, for more strategic applications, more complex applications, respondents point to a number of factors that are really persuading them to retain those applications on premises, right? And we actually see, the range of issues here again, right? It tends to be led by things like data protection. How can I ensure, or I have concerns that I'm not going to have the same level of resiliency and availability if I move my important applications to the public cloud, right? Concerns around performance. Am I going to get the same level of performance as I do on-prem. Issues around concerns around cost, around security, around compliance. Moreover, I think more importantly than that, for many organizations, that just remains a preference to keep their most important applications on premises. In fact, we did another study, and 81% said that they prefer to keep their most critical applications on premises. So in this case, the question really becomes, right? Public cloud isn't a panacea, right? It definitely has its role, but for most organizations, they are going to be retaining a good amount of applications on premises. So the question is, how do you simplify those environments? How do you modernize them in a way that is fit for purpose in this modern era? And then one final aspect I'll mention here, because I think this could be a really big factor going forwards, and that's the role of AI workloads. Because what we're seeing is that most organizations, even though the LLMs, the models are in public clouds, they're in neo clouds, they're kind of off-prem, most organizations are looking to leverage their own data with these apps, right? And where is this data? For most organizations, it's still on premises. And in fact, 78% of organizations said that they prefer to run their AI workloads on premises. So obviously, you're going to see a lot of variance between organizations, but when you look at the way the wind is blowing, the direction of travel, it certainly seems that for many organizations, at the very least, on-prem is here to stay, right? And it could be that we're actually going to see more of a role of on-prem as things like AI continue to come into play. So the question then is, how do you optimize that environment? So that's the comments that I had for you here. With that, I'll thank you for your
Yeah.
time, and I'll turn it back to Rick.
Yeah, appreciate that, Simon. And I think the comments you made on AI were spot on, because in a lot of the customer conversations that we're having today is that, it's interesting is that, the last thing they want to do, especially if you're in a competitive environment, consider pharmaceuticals or consider an environment where you're really trying to put your intellectual property, the last thing you want to do is put that in a shared public cloud environment. So we are absolutely seeing a lot of those LLMs that are being used for Gen AI applications to be able to extract more data out of it. Those are absolutely moving on-prem. And one of the things that I'm going to kind of transition to as we start talking a little bit more about how we're addressing some of those problems is how do you leverage a platform to be able to essentially not have to make those tough decisions, right? A lot of customers we talk to, they say, look, I want that agility. I want the ability to be able to streamline my operations. I want that kind of cloud benefit, but I want it on-prem, right? So the ability to be able to have that, and then if I need to extend out to a cloud instance or I need to put workloads out at the edge, I want the ability to be able to do so as well. And I had a customer quote that quoted this yesterday, and it's just, to me, it rang true, is that rather than moving the data to the workloads, I want to move the workload to the data. Right. So to me, that resonates really, really well. And I think it kind of tells a really good story. But I think a lot of what we're seeing as we engage with customers and whatnot mirrors a lot of the points that you raised, right? I mean, when you look at kind of where most organizations are today in terms of their on-prem infrastructure, and we realize that at VMware, we had a lot to do with this, right? We deployed virtualization on the compute layer, but on the storage and networking side, they essentially still use traditional hardware-based infrastructure. And as a result, you ended up with these silos, right? I had my compute team, my storage team, my networking team. I tried to layer security on top of that. But what we see as part of this, and I think as the research will show, as we start to go through the financial model, is that it really starts to drive up that cost of operations, right? Because of the fact that, I'm having a much higher physical footprint because I'm using, traditional storage systems, using traditional networking gear. I don't have the ability to take advantage of the software defined aspects of it to be able to get higher utilization. And as a result, it drives up my infrastructure costs, drives up my operational costs because I have to apply more manpower or FTEs to be able to address this. and I'm getting poor utilization of the overall infrastructure. So a lot of customers, if you look back 10, 15 years ago, a lot of customers that were facing these problems, what they did is they just went all in. They said, look, I'm going to put all my workloads into the cloud, whether it's net new, as you said within your research assignment, or whether these are workloads I have today. I'm going to go through the steps to be able to put that in the public cloud. And immediately they saw the benefits of agility, right? I've got APIs, I can automate, I get scalability. Self-service is now kind of a common capability there. But as they did that, they also saw that there's some challenges, right? It's cost becomes a big issue, and I think we'll kind of address some of those cost issues today. The cloud migrations are expensive, right? I mean, the consulting companies make a lot of money in terms of getting workloads off of your on-prem infrastructure, moving in the cloud. And I think it's the variability. It's the surprise bills, right? When you get that, that $1 million bill from your hyperscaler for the first time, it's just like, where did this come from? And a lot of that has to do with the egress and ingress charges that are applied to some of these workloads, as well as the ability to use things like reserved instances where I can essentially guarantee performance of it, but I'm paying for that reserved instance. And because of the fact that it's in the cloud and I don't have a lot of capability to be able to manage this effectively, I may end up with a lot of wasted resources. And obviously, on top of that, you also have concerns around data privacy, right? We talked about that with AI. I think, data privacy starts to become a very big issue. And certainly now with the political situation we're in from a geopolitical standpoint, data sovereignty starts to become even more important than it had been in the past. So things like privacy and compliance really start to become a challenge when I'm looking at this. And so, the way we look at this, and this is something that we've been professing at least as long as I've been at VMware back, 2018, 2019, is that really private cloud is not a place. Cloud is really more of an operating model. It's really more of a mechanism as how we do that. And if you look at kind of what the core construct of a good cloud architecture is, this models what the hyperscalers did scale. They built everything software defined, right? So they essentially took and used x86 standardized hardware platforms. They put all of the functions in software, so gave you the flexibility and the agility to be able to manage that. Self-service, right? When I go to a cloud instance, I expect that I have an automated framework that I can now essentially build blueprints and then use those as a way to be able to give my developers, my app teams, my line of business, the self-service capabilities that they need. And I want to be able to support, not only my traditional applications that are running my business and my back office, but all of those modern applications, right? That I'm using Kubernetes as a container construct to be able to orchestrate container workloads, and now certainly AI. And what we're seeing is that, especially in some of these larger LLM Gen AI workloads, is we are absolutely seeing a drive towards a much more of a model where it is essentially using a combination of VMs for the back end. It's using containers and Kubernetes as a container orchestration framework to be able to stitch this all together. And these AI, the data scientists that are driving these AI workloads, they want the ability to be able to modify their models on the fly without having to tap the shoulder of their IT team to be able to get that. So that self-service capability really starts to drive it home. And then as well, location agnostic. And this kind of really builds on the point that private cloud is not a place. It's really more of an operating model. And we certainly see this, right? I can deploy these on-prem, and most of our customers have deployed, almost exclusively on-prem. But we do have customers that are pushing the limits and starting to use edge computing now as a way to be able to drive workloads out across there, as well as public cloud, right? Because we still have all the relationships with our standard hyperscalers as well as our CSPs to be able to drive partner clouds out there. So whether it's on-prem at the edge or running in a public cloud, I now have essentially a consistent infrastructure layer that now delivers a consistent operating model that I do that. And when I apply security and governance, I'm doing so across all of those instances uniformly. So I now have a consistent way that I'm applying security and then governing that security to be able to make sure that from a standpoint of resiliency and cost control and lifecycle management, I am maintaining a global footprint but I can do so from a single console. And those are some of the advantages that we're seeing. So this is really where VCF comes in, is the ability to be able to run, that software-defined infrastructure there. So as I mentioned before, this is a common construct that you see in all of the hyperscale models. They've software-defined everything, right? They've taken their compute stack, their storage stack, networking, a good tight security, but that's now connected through a automation and operations framework that gives us the ability to be able to deliver that at scale. And if you look at how these can be deployed, right, and leveraging some of the core capabilities we built into VCF today, I have the ability to be able to take my licenses that I've purchased on-prem. Under our new licensing structure, I can now take those licenses, move it from on-prem to the edge to a CSP, or from a CSP to a hyperscaler. So really, from a customer standpoint, they have the ability to be able to manage it themselves, right? As most of our customers do, they essentially become their own cloud provider. I can essentially now run that in any of the major hyperscalers. So AWS, we actually just announced the Elastic VMware Service, EVS, which will be rolling out shortly. We have our Microsoft Azure, the AVS, the Azure VMware Service. And then on Google Cloud, we run the Google Cloud VMware Engine, GCVE, on all the major hyperscalers, as well as we have our network of over 300 of our cloud service providers that essentially take the VCF stack and run that across there. Because if you look across all three of these models, what's consistent? It's all running VCF. I have the same infrastructure layer and the same operational model. So that gives me not only license portability, so I could take my entitlements from on-prem and run in the cloud, but I can also now start to have workload portability to move workloads seamlessly between those. And again, just looking at some of the benefits that come out of this, I now have the ability to modernize infrastructure. I can deliver a cloud experience that is unified, regardless of whether I'm on-prem or out at any of these cloud endpoints that I talked about. And it's secure and resilient because we're leveraging our core cyber resilience that's built into the product, as well as the ability to be able to have things such as ransomware recovery and intrusion detection and prevention, network detection and response. These are all capabilities that can be brought into a VCF environment to give you a full infrastructure stack as part of it. And now, as I wrap up, this section and kind of hand it off to Jen on the financial model, just take a look at essentially it from an architecture standpoint. And again, keep in mind is that as you start to compare this against, what you might have in a hyperscaler or any of a hosted cloud environment, there's a lot of commonalities here, right? I can deploy this across any cloud endpoint. So whether it's on-prem, public cloud, sovereign cloud, edge, or telco, we have a common platform that supports all of those cloud endpoints, leveraging this consistent infrastructure layer, which is obviously built on our kind of best in breed capabilities for compute with vSphere, storage with vSAN, or networking with NSX. But on the storage and networking side, you do have the flexibility to be able to leverage your own storage devices. So we have customers that prefer, some of our partners from a storage standpoint. So I can use Pure, I can use EMC, Dell. I can use any of my preferred storage platforms and can also run on any networking platform as well. So, even though we've software defined that overlay, we can run on Cisco environments, we can run on any physical storage environment, and even interact with some of the capabilities that they have. For example, ACI in a Cisco environment, there are white papers out there that do kind of help provide guidance in terms of how you can work together. But what we do is we bring these together and deliver concepts that are really only traditionally expected in a public cloud environment. So I have full multi-tenant management. I can do, things such as SRE operations, fleet management of a global infrastructure. And then I also have a security dashboard that's on top of that. And this is really taking that, kind of our core persona that we typically target, which is the cloud admin, right? They're the ones that have cut their teeth on vSphere and vCenter over the years. they now can start to look at what's the overall deployment of this and start to bring it into a true operational model that now hands it off to the lines of business, the developers, the platform teams that are essentially consuming the infrastructure. And one of the things you'll see is a big focus on consumption of the infrastructure as we deploy this going forward. So, all in, this is really a core infrastructure platform that really delivers all this infrastructure as a service, but allows you now the ability to be able to run traditional VMs, Kubernetes, and AI all on the same common platform. So I'm going to hand it off now to Jen to walk us through some of the validation that she came through working with our team on the Broadcom side. Jen, I'll hand it off to you.
Great, thanks. So to assess the value of VMware Cloud Foundation, we conducted an economic validation for this project. Our process combines market expertise with real-world insights from both subject matter experts and customers. So for this project, we started by speaking with VMware experts to understand where the platform is designed to save time and money. And then we validated those claims by interviewing actual customers to see what they were experiencing in the field. So these conversations gave us a clear picture of how organizations are using VCF to modernize their infrastructure, reducing costs, improving efficiency, and gaining the flexibility that they need to stay competitive. The outcomes that we are sharing today are grounded in those actual results. And so to start off in the paper, we kind of highlight three main buckets where organizations are seeing benefits. And the first one for this evaluation was improved business benefits. First, we talked about the time to market and value, and validated that it reduces infrastructure costs by maximizing utilization of existing hardware and avoiding costly data center expansion. There was accelerated time to market for new applications where customers reported 50 to 66% faster deployment compared to traditional three-tier architecture. And it simplified operations by eliminating the manual effort and delays associated with provisioning physical servers and configuring environments. We saw increased innovation where customers confirmed that it delivers flexibility to support unique business and industry requirements through a bundled integrated platform. It enabled customers to have customized environments, such as virtualized student labs that aligned with specific organizational needs. And we validated that it improves accessibility and user experience, allowing users to work remotely and on their own schedules. Then there's security, compliance, and downtime. VCF enables zero trust architecture with microsegmentation through NSX, allowing fine-grained control over traffic between workloads and preventing lateral movement within the network. It improved workload level security by wrapping each virtual machine with firewall protections, enhancing defense against internal and external threats. And compliance is simplified with built-in tools and controls that support regulatory requirements like HIPAA, FERPA, and GDPR, helping reduce the cost and complexity of audits. And it reduced downtime risk through virtualization and intelligent failover capabilities that proactively move workloads away from failing hardware before it causes disruption. And we did validate that it supports secure and continuous operations by enabling proactive maintenance and minimizing the impact of planned or unplanned outages. The next bucket we looked at was improved productivity. And, it's pretty important in a virtualized environment. It allows IT teams to manage infrastructure efficiently and keep things running smoothly. So we spoke to our customers about management through a single interface, and we validated that it simplifies the administration of complex virtualized environments with a unified platform and centralized management interface. It improved resource optimization and planning for customers by enabling capacity management based on actual needs and streamlining deployments with reusable templates. and enhances operational efficiency by integrating compute, storage, networking, and management tools into a consistent operating model across the private cloud. We validated with customers the reduced efforts to deploy and scale services, where it simplifies service deployments and scaling with pre-validated configurations, best practices, and a unified infrastructure that reduces complexity. It supports agility and innovation for customers by eliminating the need to manage fragmented systems and enabling rapid integration of new technologies. It optimized resource utilization through dynamic resource allocation and self-service capabilities that scale automatically with demand. And next, we validated that it automates lifecycle management across compute, storage, networking, and Kubernetes to simplify ongoing infrastructure maintenance. It improved security and efficiency for customers by keeping systems up to date with minimal manual effort, reducing the risk of human error. And it freed up IT teams to focus on strategic initiatives by reducing the time spent on routine updates and maintenance tasks. And last, we validated that customers saw improvement in FTE productivity by automating provisioning, scaling, and lifecycle management. And one customer reported a 60% boost in infrastructure maintenance and efficiency. It reduces reliance on specialized roles with centralized tools that allow a single team to manage compute, storage, and networking and security. And we saw accelerated deployment and onboarding where customers were cutting application deployment times from weeks to a single day and increasing IT productivity by 20%. Excuse me. The third bucket we got into is improved cost savings, which can be a driver behind modernizing infrastructure. So customers told us that they saw improved server utilization, where server utilization was maximized with advanced virtualization through vSphere and intelligent capacity planning and optimization. Customers also said it adapts to changing demand by using predictive analytics and automated workload balancing for efficient resource allocation. And customers also said it adapts to changing demand by using predictive it reduces waste and costs by reclaiming underutilized resources like idle VM snapshots and orphan disks through automation. Can you excuse me 1 second? I am so sorry, this is causing a problem. We also talked about minimize future hardware investment, where VMware Cloud Foundation can reduce capital and operational expenses by improving resource efficiency and extending the life of existing hardware. It minimized the need for future hardware purchases, cutting costs related to power and cooling maintenance, and it enabled smarter investment decisions with tools that track hardware and software depreciation and support long-term capacity planning. We validated the lower cost of storage costs. Customers recognized reduced storage costs by pooling local storage across server clusters with vSAN, eliminating the need for external shared storage. And customers were able to simplify storage management through built-in deduplication, compression, and data protection features. It lowered complexity and overhead compared to traditional storage systems, making provisioning and maintenance more efficient. And finally, the lower cost of power and cooling and floor space. It reduced power and cooling costs by consolidating infrastructure with virtualization and hyperconverged architecture, lowering the number of physical servers required. It optimized physical resource usage through vSAN's deduplication and compression, cutting storage capacity needs and energy consumption. And it minimizes the data center footprint with customers reporting an average of 58% savings in floor space, which also helps to reduce operational expenses. So in a nutshell, these are the savings and benefits we validated with the VMware Cloud Foundation customers. So after speaking with customers and understanding their experiences, we built a modeled scenario to help visualize these savings and efficiencies. We used the VMware by Broadcom value tool, which combined the real customer data that we compiled from our interviews with VMware Cloud Foundation's architecture to deliver insights into cost savings, operational efficiency, and ROI. So to build the financial model, we use these metrics on screen, and we based it on a mid-sized organization running 5,250 virtual machines. And we looked at what it would take to move from a traditional vSphere environment to VMware Cloud Foundation over 5 years. We considered key costs like servers, storage, networking, and ongoing operations, as well as how those needs grow over time. We also factored in staffing with a typical infrastructure team managing servers, networks, and IT delivery, and the time required to migrate workloads as part of a modernization effort. The goal was really to capture a realistic end-to-end view of what the transition would cost and where the savings would come from, so we could measure the full financial impact over these 5 years. So once we built out the model, we did get that full financial view, not just upfront costs, but long-term metrics like ROI, net present value, payback period, total benefits. We looked at everything from infrastructure and software costs to the business impacts like revenue, the risk reduction, really to understand the strategic value of VCF. And here's a quick snapshot. Using the tool, the VMware by Broadcom value tool, we saw approximately 15.4 million in gross benefit, 7.1 in investments, and roughly 8.2 in net benefits. We calculated 114% in ROI, 6 million in NPV, and a payback period of 35 months over a 5-year period. So most of the cost savings came from infrastructure consolidation, needing less hardware, and cutting operational expenses. Plus, the subscription model spreads costs over 5 years, which helps avoid large upfront spending and makes budgeting more predictable. We also looked at the sustainability impact. What we found is that VMware Cloud Foundation helps lower power usage by running workloads on fewer, more efficient servers, and that means less energy needed overall, which also reduces power and cooling demands in the data center. To get a sense of the environmental impact, we use standard emission data to estimate how much CO2 could be avoided. And one of the takeaways was how directly cutting power use leads to lower carbon emissions. So to make those numbers more relatable, we translated them into everyday examples, like how many gas-powered cars would need to be taken off the road to match the same emission savings. We also looked at it in terms of how much carbon would be absorbed by trees growing over a decade. It's a helpful way to put environmental benefits into perspective and shows how IT efficiency can support sustainability goals. So we also looked at how VMware Cloud Foundation drives financial value by reducing both CapEx and OpEx, which brings down the total cost of ownership over time. We saw savings from consolidating servers, modernizing with containers, and moving to a software-defined model. That means less reliance on traditional hardware like servers, networking gear, and storage, which cut capital costs. And on the operational side, it simplified infrastructure needs, leading to fewer support contracts, lower energy use, less data center space. The better resource use with NSX and vSAN also helped reduce the overall footprint. And in total, this led to 40% cut in CapEx, 6% drop in OpEx, and a 17.6% lower total cost of ownership. And Finally, we calculated the 114% or ROI over 5 years. And to get the ROI, we looked at both total investment and net net benefits of using VMware Cloud Foundation. We used conservative assumptions to keep the projections realistic, and the analysis factored in the subscription-based licensing model and identified savings across all the key areas like compute, networking, storage, and support. We also included reductions in facilities costs like power and space, and even some operational savings since teams were able to operate more efficiently. So just to conclude, before I hand it back to Rick, just a few takeaways. Modernizing IT infrastructure, it has gone from optional to essential, and without it, organizations face higher costs, inefficiencies, and limits on scalability. We validated customer outcomes with interviews we conducted. We confirmed measurable inputs in efficiency, cost savings, and agility. We saw strong financial results with 15.4 million in gross benefits and 114% ROI. There was improved productivity where IT teams saw 60% more efficiency in infrastructure and maintenance and 20% gains in FTE productivity. Optimized infrastructure where we saw better server utilization, reduced hardware spend, and lower storage power and space requirements. And finally, future-ready architecture that enables a scalable, secure platform that supports long-term digital transformation with built-in compliance and zero trust security. And that's the analysis.
That's a lot. But I mean, as you were going through this, I'm thinking in my head, this is everything I need to convince my boss, my boss's boss, my CFO, even my chief sustainability officer is going to be happy with some of the data that comes out of this. So I think this is a great report. Again, in chat, I know there's a couple of questions that have come in, so keep the questions coming as we go through here. In chat, I will actually add the output, the full report that came from ESG on this that's published on our website today. But as we go forward now, what I wanted to do was basically introduce Keith Tudge from Chelsea and Westminster Hospital and really kind of tell his story, because I think a lot of the data points we've been talking about so far, I think are really illustrated in Keith's story. So Keith, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Very much, Rick. So yeah, I'd like to tell our story and just sort of touch on some of the key milestones in our VCF journey. So we'll wind the clock back to 2021. And this is where we were at the start of our journey. We had 4 separate VMware environments across 3 geographical locations. We had no site resiliency with our data centers, and we were running a lot of obsolete hardware and hypervisors. And this is true back in 2021. We still had a vSphere 5.5 environment. So where we were back then was a really bad place for us to be. So we started on a data center modernization, and that began in 2022. And that was migrating out all those discrete workloads from those 4 VMware environments all into VCF. And for us, off the bat, that gave us some huge immediate improvements. The stretch cluster design gave us immediate site resiliency. And I think one of the really big impacts we saw early on was it started to break down those silos in IT teams. In our previous environment with those discrete VMware environments, we still had a distinctly separate network, compute, and storage team. And we saw really early on with our adoption of VCF, how that sort of broke that down. This storage, compute, and networking teams were working much closer together, particularly with NSX within VMware. That was a real breakthrough of working much closer with the network team. I think for us, traditionally, it had always been a very separate network and VMware environment. And then it really started to blur the lines between the 2 teams, and that sort of drove greater efficiencies and collaboration with workloads. So that was some of our really early on. So we'll jump forward to 2023. That was our first major upgrade of VCF, and it was really interesting for us with what that involved. And I think looking back now, the key standpoint and the key real benefit for us there was it was a rolling upgrade with no downtime to systems. I mean, we work in a 24-hour healthcare environment, and trying to arrange downtime at the best of times is challenging. And that's partly why when we go back to 2021, some of those environments were so obsolete. It was the challenge of arranging downtime was so huge that people chose not to upgrade effectively. But VCF just took all that away instantly, and with the rolling upgrades over 24 hours, it was brilliant. The hospital never noticed. We did it during the normal working week and during the day, and the hospital never noticed this upgrade. Really major infrastructure upgrade was happening in the background, was visible to them. So I'll jump forward a couple of years. We've done several upgrades in between that, and I won't bore you with all the intricacies of every upgrade. But where we are now in 2025, we're on VCF 5.2.1 on the very latest version. I just want to pick out for us, and in terms of our operational side of things, some of the real key benefits for us. And for me, what really jumps out is the live patching, particularly in the modern cybersecurity landscape, particularly this year. That has been huge for us, being able to live up patch the ESX hosts and the virtual center with no downtime has been such an extraordinary improvement for us, particularly with us in the National Health Service. It's been a challenging 18 months in terms of cyber attacks against the NHS from various people and countries. And so when a patch comes out, and we had one recently with in March this year with Broadcom releasing we had a 0-day on ESXi, and we were able to patch that within hours of it coming out with no downtime to the system. And that really, for us, in terms of addressing that cybersecurity issue, was an absolute sort of game changer for us. And again, not having to arrange the downtime for that. And then within VCF 5.2.1, it's the ability to upgrade individual components as well. I mean, some of the changes we've had from like where we were 4.5 and to early adoption of 5. Being able to do those individual component upgrades again has been really key to addressing cybersecurity issues. So that was a brief overview of our journey to where we are now in terms of our upgrade. But I really want to touch on some of the other things where it's some of the benefits you don't necessarily see financially with or directly financially with, but it has huge benefits from myself as an operational person. And that has been around the DR, disaster tolerant and the disaster recovery capabilities in the Cloud Foundation and what that's meant for us. So our environment currently is a stretched cluster across 2 geographically distant data centers. One of them's on premise at our hospital, and one is a co-located public site. And we actually had an outage at our public co-located site. They had a major power outage which disrupted the network layer. And for us, this really showed the power of VCF and its disaster tolerant. That at the time, we had moved all our workloads to this public co-located site. And we had around 680 VMs at that site when the network layer just dropped when we had this major power outage. And those VMs all restarted on the second site, back on our on-premise sites, within 7 minutes. And the extraordinary thing was I was actually on call over the weekend as the IT manager. And we noticed by me doing some work on the Sunday evening, and I sort of logged in and thought, oh, I'm sure those workloads were in the other site and they'd failed over to the new site. And we sort of dug into it and we realized we'd had this site failover. And the extraordinary thing was nobody noticed. We never got any calls for that. We did some inquiries the following day, and the only feedback we got from that was, oh, there was just a slight network blip. And again, for us, for impact on clinical services was barely noticeable, and it was really a dramatic change for us on what that looked like. And we've had since then, we've done over our 4 years, we've had huge P1, P2 year-on-year drop on the amount of calls we've had, and to the extent this last year we've not had a single P1 call. The platform has been so stable for us. And then just want to touch on some of the benefits, and again say the huge year-on-year drop for our P1, P2 calls has been huge. But then it was some of the other features we've benefited. I think from an IT team and operation, we just tend to think in terms of call outs of when stuff breaks. But the more we sort of reflected back on our journey, we sort of seen real benefits on that. And for me, as an operational manager, the automation has been huge. It's driven change in our organization. And we've seen that in the terms of 25% reduction in our headcount, because the automation has meant it's so light touch, we don't need that day-to-day working on that. And again, there's elements with VCF. I think it's changed out of the way our support model works. Previously, with those discrete environments and where we were before, it was very much keeping the lights on, just trying to stop things failing. And the automation and the light touch in VCF has really enabled us to move to a proactive support model. The time we've gained back from not continuously firefighting, now we can sort of pick our heads up and look to what the future is, what we need to do in the future. And that's really enabled a proactive model where we stop the outages occurring. And as I touched on some of the earlier slides, the patching, again, that's been a huge time in the previous environments, particularly when it was standalone and the early days of VCF, when the patching was getting better. And where we are now, when I look back, we've had a 45% time drop in the time spent patching. It's been incredible for us. And then finally, I just want to touch on sort of our terms of us within healthcare and a 24-hour organization, what that stability and reliability has actually meant for us. So when in the old days pre-VCF, when we have an outage and the IT was unavailable, departments have to go to downtime. They still need to treat patients. They still need to see patients. And typically that downtime is a very manual process. And once the IT is back, all that data and patient information needs to be re-entered into IT, but whilst also still delivering the patient care. And it's a real expensive and time-consuming outage when we lose the IT. And it's been a lot of the feedback we've had, particularly over the last 18 months and 2 years, where our outages in terms of IT have dropped considerably. The confidence clinicians have in platforms to know it's going to be there to deliver their clinical services. And just again, that knowing that, in our post-pandemic world where a lot of healthcare organizations are still playing catch up, still trying to get their waiting lists down, having high availability of IT platforms through VCF has been absolutely key to driving through, getting those waiting lists down and improving the healthcare environment. So so that's a very brief overview of our journey, and I'll hand back to you, Rick.
Yeah, no, great story, Keith. I mean, I've seen you deliver this many times, and I'm still quite impressed. And again, I think tying all this together with some of the data that was shared by the ESG analyst team, really does speak to that. And when you look at the ability to be able to, and I realize you didn't just cut 25% of your team. They were able now to start working on other projects, right? I mean, it's the ability to be able to take those, very skilled, very talented resources that you have within your organization, but now reapply those into other projects that are going to help your hospital system progress. So I have about 8 minutes left. So I'm just going to pick out a couple of these. Actually, the first one, Keith, came in for you. How long did it take you to go from your vSphere environment to VCF?
Well, I think for us end to end, so including all the planning, it was around a 3 to 4 month window. The actual operational side of it, of moving the workloads from those 4 separate environments into VCF, was accomplished over 4 weekends. It was pretty seamless. I know some of the improvements in VCF now allows that integration to be much more seamless than it was when we did it back in the VC 4.2 days when we had the VMware HTX environment. But again, in terms of us managing those workloads and moving them from our discrete environments, again, was really straightforward and seamless for us. And that was our first indication of how VCF was going to be sort of really changing what our IT environment looked like and delivered for our users.
Excellent. Let's see. I think probably Jen, this one is probably more for you. How much real customer data was used as the basis for your financial models?
Yep, we used, so you guys have a really great tool that VMware by Broadcom Modeler does a lot of the math part for you, but the information that we used was a composite of values from all of the interviews that we had. So, for example, the 5,250 VMs that we used was a composite, basically, of the information that was provided through the interviews that we had. So we took, the number of VMs, the VM hosts. We took all of the operational information, team size, team savings, things like that, and incorporated that into the value modeler. And then of course, you have your typical calculations that you normally have for net benefits and ROI and things like that. But yeah, it was quite a bit. There was some of the things that VMware provides, like the cost of servers, things like that. But it was all the operational, all of the VM information. It was just a composite of everybody that we talked to.
Yeah, and very familiar with that tool. Obviously, we've been using that for some time now, and it certainly has advanced and I think morphed over the years as part of that. And one of the things that's important is that a lot of times they'll see 114% ROI, and you get the eye roll, and it starts to peg the BS meter. But what it allows us to do is to be able to have sit down and have a real conversation with actual customers using their data. I mean, that's the benefit of it, is that that tool is in, and we've trained our field teams, our SEs, our partners in order to be able to have those conversations, so that we can sit down with them and basically build a model based on their data, their workloads, their infrastructure, their business objectives, and be able to map it against that. So while this was generalized over a swath of wider customers, and you anonymized it, the ability to be able to sit down with customers as a part of that, I think, is really important. Let's see, Simon, I think the next one's for you. Is the research that you shared published anywhere?
So yeah, the research that I shared is published to the Enterprise Strategy Group research portal. So that is available to subscribers within that environment. But if there are any specific questions or comments on any of the research that we've shared today, then please get in touch, and we'll be happy to follow up.
Excellent. I think we have time for one more question. Let's see. How does VCF support container and AI workloads? So I think that's probably more for me. So a lot of folks don't know that, as part of our core VCF platform, we actually ship with an embedded Kubernetes runtime. So that's a vSphere Kubernetes service that is actually accompanied with a set of services that allows developers to be able to go in just using standard API, standard, YAML manifests as a way to build infrastructure as code, right? So that's all built into the product itself. We have a full automation framework that's included with that as well. On the AI side, we've done a lot of work, obviously, with some of the GPU vendors, namely NVIDIA, as a way to be able to virtualize the GPU. So think about what we've done with CPUs over the years, and the ability to be able to take a single CPU and the memory constructs and everything, and essentially virtualize that so I can abstract that out there. We've done the same thing with GPUs. So now I can take essentially a GPU workload and be able to essentially share a physical GPU amongst a number of VMs, so that I get better utilization of it. Or one of the things we've certainly seen in these Gen AI workloads is that script has definitely flipped, where customers are actually starting to push much more data than I can handle on a single GPU. So I also have the ability, leveraging this virtual GPU capability, to be able to gang GPUs together, so that if I have more workload than I can support on a single GPU, I can actually now spread that across up to 16 GPUs to be able to get larger and larger workloads. So I'm getting essentially more utilization of that physical infrastructure, obviously lowering cost, and the ability to be able to make sure that I'm, taking these very scarce, precious resources and essentially putting it under a virtualization construct, so that I can leverage things like vMotion and DRS to be able to, optimize where I place those AI workloads. So very important. I realize we're at time. I did on the screen here share a link and the QR code to be able to get the research, so you can go grab this right away. And then again, just want to thank our esteemed guest, Simon, Jen, and Keith, to share this information on this webcast. hopefully this was informative. And then just to remind everybody that we do have VMware Explore coming up. So make sure you keep that on your calendar. You start making plans to attend Explore at the end of August. So at that point, I think we're going to conclude and wrap up this webcast. Thanks again for everybody. Thanks for your time. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you.